Rundown.
Well, joining us now from Sydney, Australia, is Davis Fang. Good afternoon, morning,
Hello.
evening. Hello, Dave.
Yes, it's good evening over here. It's 8:30 in the evening, and it's very dark, I must say.
Oh, is it? Is it? Well, very lovely to see you, as always. So let's talk about the big tech news this week. Let's start with Google. They're going to enter a new market, I see.
Yes, they certainly are. Obviously, we know that Samsung has been making foldable phones for over 4 years now. And finally, Google has decided that they'll go into the market themselves with a Pixel Fold. So essentially, John Prosser, who's a serial Google Pixel leaker, has sort of leaked that next year in May, they'll release their own folding phone that will be quite similar in vein to the Samsung folding phones, and will finally give them some competition in Western markets at least.
So why would you have a folding phone?
I think that's the question. I think a lot of people do appreciate the dream of, having a small tablet that can simply fold in half to create a phone. Obviously, there are compromises that come with that. For example, the screen is extremely delicate, but nonetheless, it's quite an exciting form factor. I'm sure you even would have to admit.
Well, I guess so, but what's the price point of these? Are they cheaper?
Yeah, so... unfortunately not. As you can expect, it's a phone and a tablet all in one. So maybe just add the prices of both of them together. It's going to be around £1,500. Which is, a lot of money. Yeah. Especially as they don't last particularly long.
Don't they? So what's the lifetime of them?
Although Samsung might suggest that their phones can survive 100,000 folds or something like that. Since they've been out for a while, we can tell that the screens last maybe a year before they start breaking down, unfortunately.
So then can you replace the screen? But I assume that comes with a cost.
Yes. I think what Samsung does now is for roughly £100, you can swap the screen once, but after that, it's closer to £500. Maybe Google would make it more affordable.
You're selling this well.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say exactly that. And in terms of what's the demographic? Who buys a folding phone?
I think despite being on the market for more than 4 years now, it's still very much in the league of early adopters. Obviously, you are paying more, you are getting a bit of a compromise, but nonetheless, it's a very exciting idea. And if I had $1 million to spend, I would probably get a folding phone too.
You might need it for replacing the screen all that time. Right, let's talk about all these big tech companies. Lots and lots of job losses. Something like 120,000 jobs have been lost, haven't they?
Yes.
In firms like Twitter. Well, we know about Twitter, but Meta, Coinbase, Snap, many of them have made big miscalculations, it seems.
Yeah, so obviously when COVID was a thing, when everyone was working at home, there was a huge boom in the tech market. Everyone was hiring like crazy. I think Meta alone hired over 15,000 people this year. And simply, we're just seeing a return to what there was before. Meta fired 11,000 people this year, and despite that, it's still above the number of employees they had at the beginning of COVID. So it's not as doom and gloom as some people might project.
Okay, so just in terms of that, I mean, so they obviously thought that the future was far more online during COVID, and I think that probably was borne out by the fact most people were online, weren't they? But many of these companies ran into big trouble, I think, as the economy became more difficult. I think people maybe aren't buying the same. I don't know whether people are actually engaging in the same way. Is that what's happened, is that it's actually behavioural change? So people are actually behaving differently now that we've been unlocked?
I think yes. People are very much starting to return back into the office, whether or not, it's a desirable thing or not, that's up, that's a question for later. But yes, essentially we are using a lot less tech than we did during the pandemic, and the projections aren't quite there for the tech companies. Despite that, it's still, these tech companies still have more employees than they did before the start of the pandemic, so it's not all bad. It's just the pie-in-the-sky projects like autonomous cars, like the metaverse, that might see a little bit of struggle in the future in regards to funding and convincing shareholders.
Can I just ask you very quickly about Elon Musk? What's your take on this? I mean, half the staff have disappeared. He's now making them sign pro formas saying whether they're going to stay. They lock the doors. I mean, what's going on?
I think it's quite undeniable that, yes, he is a visionary. He does inspire a lot of people, but I'm not a big fan of his leadership style. It's just, you can't just, change something this quickly without having quite possibly disastrous effects that we are seeing at Twitter right now. I mean, 88% of their employees have left. I don't know if the website will be running this time next week, honestly.
Right. I mean, that's one way to get your salary bill down, isn't it, Renee?
Yeah, but I mean, there was a lot of talk that it would collapse this weekend, and people were saying their goodbyes on Twitter.
I saw that.
I mean, just crazy. It's still there. I feel that a man who's actually put a rocket into space and built one of the biggest electric car companies can probably make Twitter work.
I mean, he's a maverick and he's a genius, isn't he?
Yes.
Isn't that right? I mean, is that how he's viewed in the tech world as well?
I think he very much is a maverick, in, the best and worst sense. He's been quite lucky with Tesla and SpaceX, but operating a social media company is a completely different thing. Whether or not he will succeed, that's, I guess we'll discover soon enough.
Yeah, and of course I've heard he's brought in staff from Tesla and indeed from SpaceX back into Twitter to try and sort out that company, which will, as you rightly say, we'll see what happens there. This is a brilliant story, the next one. I really like this one. It's about solar panels with a difference.
Yes, it's very exciting, isn't it? So obviously we are used to the idea of a solar farm. However, they do take up a lot of space. In spaces like the Netherlands, for instance, where there perhaps isn't so much land to spare, they're starting to build solar farms on water, on reservoirs. And obviously there are upsides and downsides to this. It's very expensive. But what they're doing is basically these solar panels can adjust their tilt to get as much energy as possible from the sun, sort of similar to how sunflowers work.
I mean, this is exciting. I'm just explaining for Renee, but so essentially these are massive solar farms which are on a lake. This is called Proteus. It's named after the ancient Greek sea god. So they've got floating solar panels. They track the sun, so the panels lean towards the axis of the sun to maximise the amount of energy.
So I see your excitement, and I can see why that's exciting, but there is part of me thinking,
what about very dismissive.
Well, what about the wildlife that lives under there?
But it stops algal bloom.
That's true. However, it also does reduce the amount of oxygen that's in the very deepest parts of the lakes. So there are plus sides, there are downsides, and it also does reduce evaporation by something like 40%. But we've just got to remember that this is extremely expensive and the maintenance is quite large as well. But they will last 30 years.
But can I just also say the other thing that was really good that I read about this morning when I was reading this, which is that actually, because with solar panels normally, one of the biggest problems, operational problems, is they get too hot and can't generate as much electricity. Now, the reason these are very good is because the water they're sitting on cools them down. So in fact, see? So you like it now?
I like it, and I like anything that goes on sea or water, but I do think we have to also think of the knock-on effects on the wildlife, because, we need all of those things. I mean, I like the idea, for example, of solar panels in pavements, because,
I like that.
if we could actually walk on them, because it's space that's there, you're not taking land from anywhere.
I agree.
I think
Sorry,
I think the good thing with these solar panels right now is that they're just being built on artificial reservoirs, so it's not really disrupting any wildlife. And they can also be used in conjunction with hydropower to, make the power source more reliable and stable. So, while the wildlife, argument is there, at the moment, we haven't quite progressed that far.
Very good. Lovely to see you, Davis. Thank you very much indeed. That's Davis Fang there, our tech presenter, live from Sydney in Australia. Lots of messages. I really like them, by the way.
Yes.
As you could tell.
Absolutely. No, I do like it. But I also think we always have to think of the knock-on effect.
Yes, I'd forgotten they are on reservoirs. So he made that point and he made it well. Lots of